To tell you the truth, across the two footy channels that I run, I'm not going to lie to you, sometimes I sit down to do a video and I'm like, I don't really feel like doing this video. It's not something I'm passionate about, but I do feel like I need to make this video. By contrast, today's video is one that has me a little bit keen to get into. You know, I feel a little bit like a fly. You know when a fly stops and rubs its hands together? I've been pacing around the room, excited to crack into this. What I'm going to do today is use Tier Maker as a visual guide, as another way of analyzing a list in terms of where it's at in the rebuild. So as you can see here, I'm going to categorize the current 2024 playing list into different sections to give us a good feel for how much talent we've accumulated, which players have what value to us over the next few years. And you can maybe look at this and analyze different aspects of the list that we need to add to. It's just another way of doing it. So I'm just going to crack straight into it without too much more preamble. We've got top end core. We've got players that I think will be potential guns, supporting talent, more speculative types, transition players. So what do I mean by that? Players that are currently on the list that are almost certainly not going to be part of the next genuine finals push. They may still be on the list the next time we play finals, but not a core part of the list build. We've got short-term contributors. Those are the current veterans that are going to be gone in a few years, and then the players that are Gornsky. So I've pre-filled it with the players we know are not going to be on the list next year. Tommy Barras has requested a trade to Hawthorn. As I woke up this morning, I woke up to the news Jack Darling has formally requested a trade to North Melbourne. Andrew Gaff has retired, and I've also woken up to the delistings of Zane True, Jordan Baker, and Jermaine Jones. So that's a good starting point. And we will work through, what the rest of the list looks like. I think this will be quite helpful. So top end core, I think we can all agree Harley Reid probably forms a very central part of this. Where is young Harley? Aha, there you are, you little minx. Scrolling up, top end core. So we're talking about the core nucleus of talents that will form the main part of a premiership push in the future. And Harley Reid is pretty much a number one talent if you're talking about upside there. I'm talking guys like, I don't know, when I think of like Richmond's premiership squad, that was built fundamentally around a few players such as Dusty Martin, Alex Rance, Jack Riewoldt, Trent Cotchins, and then you had, some guns around that and supporting talents. But those were the main primary movers, and I think Harley Reid clearly forms a big part of that. Now, the cutoff for this is going to be tricky. It's a little bit arbitrary, right? So when we say top-end core, I'm inclined to include players like Oscar Allen and Jake Waterman. Now, they're about 25 and 26 respectively. Do they form part of our next premiership team? Well, I don't know if it needs to be that cut and dry, but I'm going to say arbitrarily 26 and under. You can still probably qualify for this. If you're between 26 and 30, you're probably more in that transitional phase. And then anything over 30 is a short-term contributor. So let's use that as a general guide. I'm going to put Oscar Allen in there, current captain. And, in 5 years' time, we will have been out of finals for 9 years. It's fair to suggest we're at least deep, and he will be 31. I think that still counts. And how old was Kennedy when we won the premiership in 2018? I think he's born in 87, so he was 31. So I think he forms a key part of our list build for sure. And I'm going to put Jake Waterman in here as well. Jakey boy comes up here. I think these three are the three elite talents, to be honest. Now, some of our other better talents, Elliot Yeo and Jeremy McGovern, are over the age of 30, and McGovern in particular, I think he'll turn 33 next year. So we might pre-fill them into short-term contributor. Jeremy McGovern here, and where is Elliot Yeo? There's going to be a lot of silences edited out while I try and find these bloody players. There we go, we got Elliot Yeo there. Okay, so we've got players over 30 that are still going to add some value in the short term. But, particularly Elliot Yeo still played some good footy this year, but I think you're at the point where, you've got to be managed and rested, every 5 or 6 weeks because of, injury history and stuff like that. He certainly qualifies as short-term contributor. So what's an example of a transition player? Well, I think of other co-captain Liam Duggan here. Now, it's not that Liam Duggan's not good and he's already a premiership player and he's good enough to be part of another premiership team, but he will turn 29 in 2025, albeit at the end of it. Late birthday from memory, Liam. So you're probably at the point where you're just over the edge of being I don't even know where you categorize him other than that. You wouldn't put him in top end core, I wouldn't have thought. So transition player makes sense. Jamie Cripps, as I'm spotting here, another short-term contributor. 2025 could well be his last season. He'll be out of contract at the end of it and about 33 years old. Tim Kelly, again, his age starts with a 3. I'm pre-filling a lot of the bottom parts so we can simplify this a little bit and move some names around to make it a little bit easier to perceive what we're looking at. Luke Edwards, again, I think is pretty much a long shot to play on next year. Now, we don't have answers on Bergiel or Witherden, so maybe for the time being, Bergiel could well and truly be delisted, you know, by the time this video comes out, but he still technically hasn't been. So I'm going to put him in speculative. There's a chance that he plays on and then, you know, earns a debut next year. It is possible. So I'm going to put him in speculative. That's pretty much the category for players who you can't rule out. But at this point, you know, it's, you know, far from being a sure thing. Tommy Cole's probably another transition player. So he is born in 1997. I remember that because I know pretty much everyone's draft year. That puts him at turning 28 in 2025. So again, probably more one of those players that's important to helping us maintain or build a competitive team rather in the short term by being that mature, experienced body. As a defender, him and Duggan probably both fall under that category. Locke Rawlinson, he earned another contract. I'm going to put him in speculative. Again, I'm filling up a lot of the bottom first so that we can make some calls on the higher guys. I want to talk about those a little bit more in depth. Jaden Hunt, another short-term transition player. Again, he's not quite 30. I actually forget how old Jaden Hunt is, but I reckon he was 27 when we recruited him, so that puts him at 29. So just technically, you know, still around for a good enough amount of years where he could be a transition player. I suppose you could apply the same logic to Elliot Yeo, who has a 3-year contract, but we're probably splitting hairs there. Either way, a player that helps us be competitive in the short term, but is not someone that you would put in your future Eagles premiership team, or at least a team that's going to be competing, because we're a good few years away from being a top 4 team, you would suggest. Petruccelli probably by definition goes as transition player. Now, this does not mean necessarily that I think he's going to play for the next 5 years and be a transition player, but by definition, being a 25-year-old, he will be a free agent at the end of next season. No guarantee he'll get a contract past that year. So in a way, he's speculative, but I think even the best case scenario, he's probably a transition player. I'd be surprised, you know, he could pull a Jake Waterman and become a much better player and make me look a little bit silly. Jake's the same age as, well, Jake a year ago was the same age as Petruccelli now. But either way, you know, I think he's probably shapes more as a transition player for us currently. And, you know, perhaps at the end we can go back and assess, you know, what is the quality of this transition player category. Dom Sheed, he's 29. I mean, you could put Gornsky because I don't know if he's going to find his way back into the team, but probably goes into transition player. No, short-term contributor, Dom Sheed, because, you know, I think whatever contract he earns next year will probably be a small one, as in not too many years. I think we're probably going to get a little bit out of Dom Sheed by the time he wraps up. He'll be 30 at the end of next season, and with his troublesome body situation, his injury history, can't get on the park, and also out of form when he is on the park, he probably falls into that category as well. Now, I want to make it clear that Josh Rotham has not been delisted, but I think it's almost a certainty at this point. I think there may be a chance that another club signs him as a delisted free agent or something like that, or maybe as a free agent in general, in which case we wouldn't get any compensation. There was a little bit of a murmuring around that. Either way, I don't expect Rotham to be on the list next year. I'd be highly surprised, but he hasn't been delisted. I'm going to put him in Gornsky, personally. What about Witherden? I'd probably put him in transition player. I have this feeling that Witherden will survive because I did my best 22 a few days ago, and you just look at the medium defender depth, and Witherden, you know, he's not horrible, but I think he just frustrated me at this year, and I feel the need to clarify that because if you follow the channel throughout the year, you had me talking a little bit about how frustrated I found some of his performances, but he's okay. He's okay. You know, I'd love to form a back seven around, you know, different players next season, but nonetheless, I think he could stay on his depth, and he does bring a lot of experience. He is a good footy brain. I could see him being a transition player for at least another couple of years, potentially. I don't think he goes in Gornsky. I think he's on a different level, and I would clearly prefer to keep Witherden than, well, pretty much any player listed in Gornsky currently. So I'll make the slight concession then with Witherden, although again, like I said, we will go back to these categories and rate the quality of what we think they are. Liam Ryan, probably, again, transition player. So he is the same age as Duggan and still offering a bit to the team, and I don't think has too much doubt that he's going to be a best 22 player next year. I think that I do read some comments and people are a little bit harsher on Ryan than I personally am. I think considering no preseason last year, he was okay. He's probably not going to win another All-Australian, but he counts as a transition player, and I have no reason to believe that Liam Ryan won't be best 22 for the next handful of seasons. So if I'm looking at this correctly, we are left with a lot of the young talent, and that's really where we want to delve into with this particular video. So we've got to separate them into top-end core, potential guns, and supporting talent, and of course speculative talents as well. So maybe let's move through some of the guys we know are speculative. I mean, Harry Barnett, probably that. Again, you know, didn't have a great year, but to be honest, for a young tall, that's not uncommon, so not writing him off at all. I do wonder if his future might be as a key back. That wouldn't be the worst thing in my personal opinion. Give him a crack at centre-half back in the waffle next year and see how he goes. Who else would you count as speculative? Cal Jamison, probably textbook speculative. Again, he's probably almost old enough to be moved into transition. Probably not. I'd say he's still part of the young group and still unproven and still unsure whether he's going to make it at AFL level. But I've seen a bit, and considering our need for key back depth, definitely not writing him off it by any stretch, but certainly speculative. Cohen Livingston just won another year on the list with a 1-year extension. Happy with that. Again, 19-year-old ruck forward, had a good year, but very much a speculative talent for the purposes of this. All right, maybe we should start looking at who the guys that I think are potential guns. So these guys, potential gun, could elevate themselves into top-end core at some point. So for me, I'm big on Elijah Hewitt. I still think, until you've told me that he's in serious doubt to have a proper career, I'm not going to believe it. He just had a bad year of injury, and hopefully he's over that. I believe it was the same injury that Finn Callahan had at GWS, and he seems to be going just fine. So on talent, I think Elijah could move up into this top-end core thing, and I was tempted to put him there, but I'll say these for the guys who are a bit more proven. I think it's fair to suggest Harley Reid has proven himself. Doesn't mean he's going to become Dusty Martin, but you know what I mean. There is a fair different level of talent displayed between Reid and Hewitt, but Hewitt, I think, definitely has the potential to form a really key part of our next premiership midfield, if you like. Ruben Jinbi is probably a potential gun. Now, again, I similarly think he could be top-end core, but this is where it gets a little bit iffy and nuanced, because when I think of top-end core, the players that you build your team around for a premiership list, I think you look in key position, particularly forward, and I guess back as well, and you look in genuine midfielder. Now, Jinbi may not actually fall into that category of being a genuine midfielder. He might be a seriously good halfback. And I think there has been some really good halfbacks that form a key part of their team and probably go into top-end core. So, like, there's Luke Hodge, but that's a pretty high bar. Does Bashar Hooley count, for Richmond as being top-end core? Is he more of a supporting gun? That one, it's a little bit iffy. I think you do tend to discriminate a little bit against non-midfielders and non-key forwards and key backs. So that's an iffy one for Jinbi, but he could become, what if he becomes Shannon Hearn? Does Shannon Hearn count as top-end core? Maybe he does. So for now, I'll put him into the potential gun, because we don't know he's going to become as good as Shannon Hearn or Luke Hodge. That's an extremely high bar. So I'll put him in potential gun for now. But, very happy with the play that we have in Rubes, and I'm increasingly pleased about it. The more I see him in defense, I think we've got a 250 gamer. Now, again, I have to balance this analysis with a degree of what evidence we've seen and proof, and the claims that I make can't be too opinionated, but I do need to put some opinion in here as well. And I'm going to put Ryan Marrick in this potential gun thing. Now, again, whether he becomes top-end core really depends on what position he plays. And honestly, I think we've probably underutilized Marrick. And I really hope that whoever comes in as senior coach in 2025 sees a clear position for him that utilizes his talents and optimizes for his skill set. So if Ryan Marrick becomes a gun key forward, which is not out of the question, he's 196 centimeters, albeit quite skinny. Is he the top-end core? I probably think he certainly has the potential to become that. Does he stay a wingman that gets, low possessions? Probably doesn't really qualify as top-end core there. Does he become a gun intercepting halfback? Maybe in the Sicily role. I mean, Sicily probably would count as top-end core for Hawthorn there. Is Marrick a Gunston type? Does Gunston count as top-end core in, maybe not so much Hawthorn now, but in previous years? Probably not. So we'll wait and see on Marrick. He could be anything. But I think what we have there is an A-grade footballer that is probably going to make it one way or another. We just need to use him right. So I think he qualifies on talent with Hewitt and Jinbi personally. What about Brady Hough? You probably put him in potential gun. So he's already very good. He's 21. What does the top end ceiling for him look like? I mean, if he's always a medium to small defender, even if he's one of the best in the comp at it, potentially, even if he becomes that, does that qualify him as a top end core part of our premiership team? Maybe not. He'd maybe need to evolve into a Hooley-like halfback or whatever, or a genuine midfielder, which probably isn't the way he's going. I mean, you probably consider him already a gun because he's the most proven out of any of these boys, but probably, discriminating against him on position. And again, we'll go back through all of this and make assessments. For the sake of efficiency, I think we can start filling a little bit more of the speculative talents here. There's guys here that we can consider speculative. Like Jai Cully, you know, doesn't necessarily have a spot on the list next year. You know, not writing him off, but again, probably counts as speculative. Who else here? I mean, Harvey Johnston, I think, could be... In 12 months, I think he could be moving up into this potential gun category, and the same thing with Tyrell Dewar. However, they've both played single-digit amounts of games and have shown flashes. Now, if they had played, you know, 10 games like Harley Reid played 10 games, we'd move them up. And I'm very bullish about them. So they're probably my favourite two out of this entire list down here so far, but probably still need to prove themselves. Now, I think both of them could move up past supporting talent. They could leapfrog supporting talent if they have a good season, good preseason. You know, Jack Hutchinson, probably the same. So I think out of these three, these are the most likely to jump up to potential gun or supporting talent within 12 months. Archer Reid, speculative again, you know, had a good year in the waffle, but let's be real. You got to consider him speculative if he hasn't played a single game of AFL yet. Clay Hall, similarly, you know, he has played a little bit of AFL, but so little a sample size that you have to consider him speculative. I'm not confident yet that necessarily that Clay Hall, if we're being honest about this analysis, we don't want to inflate this analysis by simply saying Clay Hall's had good 5 games, decent year in the waffle, let's move him up. Nah, there's still some doubt around him, but I'm obviously optimistic. Rhett Bazzo, I think with his injury issues, is here in speculative, but I do think within 12 months, if he gets a good run at it, it can move up, absolutely. Jack Williams, probably in potential gun. Now, what you're seeing here, and this is why this, as the picture comes together, it's getting more and more helpful, because you look how many key forwards are in this area here. This is the strength of our list. But again, we'll put a pin in that for the time being. Now, I'm just noticing we have no one in supporting talent, so maybe we need to reshuffle this. Matthew Flynn, transition player. I missed him earlier. He's 26, 27, not even really cracking a game at the moment. I think best case scenario, he has a good few years at West Coast, but probably not part of the premiership build. Bailey Williams is a little bit an iffy one. I'll probably put him in supporting talent. Again, I think he probably does make it. I was a little bit disappointed with the season he had, but I think he'll be there, although he won't be a primary piece of the puzzle. And a lot of these guys probably do go into supporting talent now, I think about it. So you've got Brockman. I mean, I still think that's kind of speculative. I'm going to put him in speculative, to be honest. I don't see enough AFL traits with Brockman. You know, he's classy when he gets the ball, but, you know, he doesn't particularly kick it far. There's not a lot of penetration on his kicks. He doesn't use the ball in an aggressive way. He doesn't really use his speed to get around players or generate overlap or anything like that. I think he needs to show me more personally, as a side note on Brockman. Campbell Chester equally is tough. He's equally tough. I think he has what it takes. I'm just concerned about how little he finds the ball, but when he has the ball, I think he's fine. I think probably supporting talent. I do think I'm more optimistic about Chester than I am about Brockman at this current point in time. I think Brockman is more speculative. I think Chester has some more clear AFL traits. If he can just continue to build on his composure. You know, I remember Brad Shepherd in his first 50 games. Took a long while to get to that point. Chester, I think, is supporting talent. Bearing in mind, I don't think his ceiling is that high. He's never going to be an A-grade midfielder and therefore not a potential gun. But I think I'm more confident about him than some of these others. Harry Edwards, probably supporting talent. Probably not an A-grader, to be honest. I mean, anything can change. Sometimes with tools, it happens late and you're like, oh, shit. Harry Edwards probably hasn't done enough to be a potential gun. That's fair. In my opinion is he will probably be a good, long-term, serviceable key back at AFL level and probably constitutes that. Noah Long, you could probably move into potential gun. Now, this one, again, is tough because not top-end core because a small forward, unless you're Dylan Moore. Dylan Moore probably counts as top-end core for Hawthorn. That's going to be a weird list to analyse if I ever took that job on, but he does have the potential to be a very good high-level player for his position, but probably discriminate against his position. You know, if he never becomes a midfielder, which at this point is no indication he will, then probably discriminate against him. Again, a little bit of recency bias would make you doubt Noah Long because a bit of a quiet start of the season last year before getting injured, but I think if we're assessing on talent, he belongs with a lot of these guys here. Now, can we move some of these speculative types up? I think you can probably, in my personal opinion, which is at the end of the day mostly what this is, if I'm being honest about some of these guys, I think Rhett Bazzo I'd probably move up. This is a talent assessment thing, not an evidence-based thing. I realize that, but I do think Rhett Bazzo, I've got more of a degree of confidence about him making it. He's a potential gun. I probably wouldn't go that far, but he's probably AFL quality. And I think, honestly, I think I'm more confident about him than others. I'm going to move Tyrell Dewar up and Johnston. So let's probably, maybe even Hutchinson. So let's just create a separation here between guys we've seen do it a little bit at AFL level in Hutchinson, Johnston, and Dewar versus these guys here who are speculative. I suppose Brockman probably also goes up one end, doesn't he? Now, I think Johnston, Dewar, and Hutchinson have the potential to move up into this group here. That is in 12 months or so from now. I'm not going to do that today, but they probably on talent have the potential to move up. Would they move all the way into core? Probably not, but they could be in gun. The reason being, Tyrell Dewar would probably have to become a Mark LaCroix level forward to be part of a team's core. Johnston would probably have to become a genuine wingman that's winning 25 touches a game, eventually, not within 12 months, but to become a part of a team's core. And Hutchinson is just such a unknown quantity at this point that he could move up. But at the moment, I'd say there's a clear separation between these guys and these guys. So in summary, what do we take from this analysis here? Okay, first of all, we don't need to analyze Gornsky. Short-term contributor, it is what it is. I mean, I think Gov, Yo, and Kelly have the most potential to keep offering, beyond next year. I mean, Cripps and Sheed, I think, I'd imagine, move on at the end of 2025. Transition players, look, that's solid. But the reason I want to bring that up is, okay, so you've probably, if you're ordering it a little bit by real value, you'd say Duggan, Cole, Hunt, and Ryan still have plenty to offer in terms of helping out this team. Petrocelli, Witherden, and Matthew Flynn, I'm not even sure are best 22 next year. So this transitional player is probably the category that Liam Baker and Jack Graham would fall into if we were hypothetically going to get them. That is the part of the list that we've obviously identified that we need to strengthen, particularly when outside of Duggan, all of Cole, Hunt, and Ryan probably could have been more consistent this season. So you could absolutely address this as being an important thing for us to improve upon. Speculative, I mean, you're always going to have speculative talents. Who can move up in the next couple of years? Well, I'm kind of confident about Archer Reid based on what I've seen and read about his performance in the Waffle this year. Clay Hall certainly could be an AFL quality midfielder, and the rest are probably a little bit further back. I mean, Colin Livingston, he's so raw that it's hard to really make a case for that. Barnett, I hope, makes it as a key back. But we're probably talking about Archer Reid and Clay Hall out of this group. Supporting talents, who can move up? Well, Bailey, again, probably low ceiling, but I think could be a decent AFL level ruckman. Harry Edwards as well could be a gun. I mean, it's just so hard to extrapolate on what we've seen so far because he's been so injury prone. Rat Bazo, I'm quietly confident about, will be an important part of the team. Dewar, Johnston, and Hutchinson here are the three here I'm confident can elevate themselves. But the other way to analyze this, like I said, is what kind of positions are a lot of these guys. So if you look at the potential guns, like I said, you got Waterman and Allen, Marrick and Williams. That's the first thing that catches your eye. 4 tall forwards, hence why there's been so much talk about Marrick playing in another position. I'd like to see him in the back half for sure. What else do we see here? A complete absence of key backs for a start. Could Harry Edwards become that? We hope so, but it's probably not enough on its own, and that's best case scenario. We probably need to add a core key back to this list build to add some balance to it. We also only have one top-end core midfielder, and I think you'll find that a lot of the best premiership teams will have multiple midfielders forming a key part of the core nucleus of that team. I mean, going back to Richmond, they might be one of the only examples I can think of a team that probably had one amazing midfielder in Dusty. Cochin, I suppose at his best was good, but I don't think he was necessarily elite for a lot of his career. That's going to ruffle some feathers if there happens to be a Richmond fan watching this deep into this video. But I think it's true, it's not like it's Black and Ackermanis and Voss, going back to the Brisbane three-peat. I mean, we've got Harley Reid. I'm confident Hewitt can make it, but other than that, none of these guys are midfielders. So that tells us a little bit about what we need to address in this year's draft. So, in 12 months' time, hopefully, we've got Sid Draper or Sam Lawler or Finn O'Sullivan, whoever it may be. Hopefully they're going to be in one of these two top categories. We also probably need to address a key back. I've talked about this a lot. I don't necessarily think we need to spend a top 10 pick on a key back. I think history will show that they tend to come a little bit later in drafts, and you don't need to spend big on a key back. I mean, Harris Andrews went quite later. Wiedering was pick 1. Sam Taylor was pick 25. But either way, this gives us a good representation that we've got a couple of midfielders, a stack of key forwards, and a few role players in Marrick and Long who could become something else. Brady Hoff as well. Midfield, key back, and some running defenders that can really set up play. I think that's what this list build is lacking. Who out of this group could become any of that? Well, I mean, Harvey Johnston, if he becomes a running half back, Campbell Chesser as well, probably still unlikely to become that A grader. So then you look at guys like Toby Travalia in this year's draft or someone like that. So that is hopefully a helpful exercise in analysing our list. I hope I've done a good job as I was hoping. I think that maps up, our current list strengths and weaknesses and things we need to address. So in summary, more midfielders, a good key back that we can rely on for years to come. And, of course, look at these transition players. How can we add to that? We talked about Liam Baker and Jack Graham. But let me know in the comments your thoughts on all of that, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.